The dust cloud rose from the excavation site as Dr. Lisa Park carefully brushed away centuries of accumulated dirt from what looked like a metallic surface. The twin suns of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the archaeological dig, and the heat made her protective suit stick uncomfortably to her skin. She had been working this site for 3 months now, uncovering the remains of what appeared to be an ancient human settlement that predated official colonization records by several decades. "Found something interesting, Doc?" called out her assistant, Tony Martinez, as he climbed down into the pit beside her. His boots crunched on the gravelly surface as he approached the partially exposed object. Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead and pointed at the metal surface. "This isn't supposed to be here. According to UF records, this planet wasn't colonized until 2355, but the carbon dating on the organic materials around this site suggests human presence as early as 2340. Tony crouched beside her and examined the metallic object more closely. "Looks like some kind of storage container. Military grade, by the looks of it." Lisa nodded and continued her delicate work. The object was roughly cube-shaped, about the size of a briefcase, with what appeared to be a sophisticated locking mechanism. As she cleared away more debris, she could see scratched markings on its surface, serial numbers, and what looked like a military unit designation. "Get me the portable scanner," she instructed Tony. "I want to run this through the database before we try to open it." As Tony fetched the equipment, Lisa studied the markings more carefully. The serial numbers were partially worn away, but she could make out what appeared to be UFMIL2341, followed by a series of numbers and letters. The unit designation was even more intriguing. It read Spec Ops Titan. The scanner hummed to life as Tony returned with the device. Lisa carefully ran it over the surface of the container, collecting data about its composition and age. The results appeared on her tablet screen, confirming her suspicions. The metal composition matches UEF military specifications from the 2340s, she told Tony, but that's impossible. There were no UEF military operations on this planet during that time period. Tony scratched his head. "Maybe it's from an earlier survey mission that wasn't documented." Lisa shook her head. "UEF keeps detailed records of all military operations. Every survey, every scout mission, every supply drop. If this was here officially, there would be records." She made the decision to attempt opening the container. Using her tools, she carefully worked on the locking mechanism. It took nearly an hour, but eventually she heard a soft click as the lock disengaged. The lid opened with a slight hiss, revealing that the container had been sealed against the elements. Inside, Lisa found what appeared to be data storage devices. Several small crystalline chips that looked like standard military-grade memory cores. There were also some personal items, a faded photograph of a young man in military uniform, a set of dog tags, and what appeared to be a handwritten journal wrapped in protective material. "Tony, get Captain Hayes on the come," Lisa said, her voice filled with excitement. "Tell him we need to get these items back to the research station immediately." As Tony made the call, Lisa carefully examined the dog tags. The name stamped on them read, Morrison, J., followed by a service number and blood type. The photograph showed a young man with dark hair and determined eyes. Wearing a UEF uniform she didn't recognize, Captain Ben Hayes arrived at the dig site within an hour, accompanied by 2 security personnel. Hayes was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s who had served in the UEF military before taking his current position as head of security for the new Geneva research station. "What do you have for me, Dr. Park?" Hayes asked as he examined. The open container. Lisa showed him the contents. Military equipment from 2341, but there's no record of any UF presence on this planet during that time. The name on the dog tags is Morrison. J. I was hoping you might be able to help me identify him. Hayes picked up the dog tags and studied them carefully. His expression grew thoughtful, then puzzled. "The service number format is correct for that time period, but ... He paused, frowning. "I'll need to run this through the military database back at the station." They carefully packed the items and returned to the research station, a sprawling complex of interconnected buildings that housed nearly 200 researchers, support staff, and security personnel. The station was built into the side of a mountain, providing protection from the planet's occasional severe weather. In the station's main laboratory, Lisa began the delicate process of accessing the data storage devices. The military-grade encryption was sophisticated, but not impossible to crack with the station's advanced computer systems. As the first files began to decode, she called Director Alan Price to inform him of the discovery. Price was a thin, nervous man in his 60s who had spent his entire career in UEF research administration. He arrived at the laboratory within minutes, clearly agitated by the implications of Lisa's find. "Dr. Park, you're certain about the dating on these items?" he asked, adjusting his glasses as he studied the preliminary data. "Absolutely. The carbon dating is consistent across multiple samples. This equipment was definitely here in 2341, possibly earlier." Price exchanged a worried glance with Captain Hayes. "Have you attempted to access the military database regarding this Morrison individual?" "I tried," Hayes replied. "That's the strange part. According to the database, no one named J. Morrison served in the UEF military during the 2340s. In fact, there's no record of anyone with that name in any special operations unit during that entire decade." Lisa looked up from her work at the computer terminal. "That's impossible. These dog tags are genuine UEF issue. The serial numbers check out. Someone named Morrison was definitely here, and he was definitely military." The first data file finished decoding, appearing on the main screen. It contained what appeared to be a mission log, written in standard military format. The entries were dated from late 2341 and early 2342, describing reconnaissance operations and contact with what were referred to as indigenous life forms. "Indigenous life forms?" Lisa read aloud. "But the official surveys showed no intelligent life on this planet." Director Price stepped closer to the screen, his face growing pale as he read the entries. "Dr. Park, I need you to stop this investigation immediately." Lisa turned to face him, surprised by his sudden change in demeanor. "Sir? I don't understand." "This is exactly the kind of historical discovery that could revolutionize our understanding of early human expansion. I'm ordering you to cease all work on this material and turn everything over to UF security," Price said firmly. "This is now classified as a matter of interplanetary security." Captain Hayes stepped forward, his expression troubled. "Director, with respect, I think we should at least determine what we're dealing with before we involve higher authorities." Price shook his head vigorously. "No, Captain. This has already gone too far. Dr. Park, you will prepare a complete report of your findings and then consider this matter closed. Is that understood?" Lisa stared at the director, then at the data still scrolling across the screen. The mission logs contained references to successful diplomatic contact with alien species, detailed linguistic analysis, and what appeared to be breakthrough communication protocols. This wasn't just random military equipment, it was evidence of first contact with alien intelligence, decades before the official records claimed such contact had occurred. "Sir, I can't just ignore this," she said quietly. "If these records are authentic, they represent a major historical discovery. The UEF has the right to know about this." Price's face hardened. "Dr. Park, you have your orders. I suggest you follow them." As the director left the laboratory, Lisa exchanged a meaningful look with Captain Hayes. Something was very wrong here, and she had the feeling that J. Morrison's story was far more important than anyone wanted to admit. 3 days had passed since Director Price ordered Lisa to stop her investigation. She sat in her quarters, staring at the copied files she had secretly downloaded before being forced to hand over the original data. The official report she had submitted was sanitized and brief, mentioning only the discovery of unidentified military equipment with no historical significance, but Lisa could not forget what she had seen. The mission logs had contained detailed descriptions of contact with alien beings, sophisticated translation work, and diplomatic protocols that seemed decades ahead of current UEF methods. Someone named Morrison had been conducting first contact operations in 2341, and the UEF wanted that information buried, thus she made a decision that would change everything. Opening her personal communication device, she scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for, Jake Turner. They had served together briefly during her time with UF Survey Corps before she had left military service to pursue archaeology. Jake had stayed in the intelligence division for several more years before disappearing into the civilian sector. The communication took nearly 6 hours to reach Europa mining colony, where Jake now worked as what he politely called a information consultant. When his face appeared on her screen, Lisa was struck by how much he had aged. His dark hair was now streaked with gray, and his eyes carried the weariness of someone who had seen too much. "Lisa Park," Jake said with a tired smile. "I heard you were digging up old rocks on some backwater planet. What brings you to contact? An old friend like me?" Lisa glanced around her quarters nervously before speaking. "Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you ever heard the name Jack Morrison in connection with UEF Special Operations?" Jake's expression changed immediately. The casual friendliness vanished, replaced by sharp alertness. "Where did you hear that name?" "I found some old military equipment. The name was on dog tags. But when we tried to look him up in the database, there was no record of anyone by that name serving in the military during the 2340s. Jake was quiet for a long moment, his eyes studying her face through the communication link. "Lisa, you need to be very careful about asking questions like that. Some names have a way of attracting the wrong kind of attention." "Jake, please." "I found evidence of first contact operations that predate official records by decades. Someone is covering this up, and I think Morrison was involved." Jake ran a hand through his hair and looked around his own room as if checking for listeners. "I can't talk about this over regular channels. If you're serious about this, you need to come to Europa. But Lisa, I'm warning you, once you start down this path, there's no going back. Some secrets are buried for good reasons." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. "I'm already too deep to stop now. My director shut down the investigation the moment we found the data. That tells me there's something here worth finding. Give me 12 hours to make some arrangements. When you arrive, don't come to the mining facility. There's a bar called Murphy's in the civilian sector. Be there at 2100 hours local time. Come alone and make sure you're not followed." The connection ended, leaving Lisa alone with her thoughts and growing anxiety. She had expected Jake to be interested in her discovery, but his reaction suggested that Morrison's name carried more weight than she had imagined. The journey to Europa took 2 days. Lisa used her accumulated research leave and told her colleagues she was visiting family. On Mars, the passenger transport was crowded with miners, traders, and travelers heading to the outer colonies. She kept to herself, spending most of the journey reviewing the copied files and trying to piece together the fragments of information she had found. Europa mining colony was a rough industrial settlement built around massive ice extraction facilities. The civilian sector was a collection of prefabricated buildings and converted cargo containers that housed the bars, shops, and residential areas where off-duty miners spent their time and money. Murphy's bar was exactly what Lisa had expected. Dim lighting, loud music, and the smell of recycled air mixed with alcohol and industrial lubricants. She found a corner table and ordered a drink, trying to look like just another traveler killing time. Jake arrived exactly at 2100 hours, but he was not alone. With him was a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and the bearing of a career military officer. She moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command, her eyes constantly scanning the room for potential threats. "Lisa Park," Jake said as they sat down, "I'd like you to meet Maria Santos. She's retired UEF, former colonel in intelligence operations." Maria studied Lisa with sharp blue eyes. "Jake tells me you've been asking questions about Morrison. Before we go any further, I need to know exactly what you found and who else knows about it." Lisa briefly explained her discovery, the data she had uncovered, and Director Price's reaction. Maria listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "You copied the files before turning them over?" Maria asked. "Yes, I thought there might be historical value in preserving them." Maria exchanged a meaningful look with Jake. "Dr. Park, what I'm about to tell you is not officially sanctioned by any government agency. There are some of us who believe that certain historical truths have been deliberately suppressed for political reasons." She paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. "The name Jack Morrison is known to a small group of veterans and researchers who have spent years documenting what we call the lost history of human expansion. Morrison was real, and what he accomplished was extraordinary. But his story contradicts the official narrative that the UEF leadership wants to maintain." Lisa leaned forward eagerly. "What kind of story?" The kind that shows peaceful contact with alien species was not only possible but successful," Maria replied. "Morrison developed diplomatic protocols that could have prevented decades of conflict. But those protocols threatened the military-industrial complex that benefits from constant preparation for war." Jake nodded grimly. "We've been collecting evidence for years. Documents, testimony from surviving veterans, physical artifacts. The UEF has been systematically erasing any record of successful, peaceful contact with alien species. There are others like us," Maria continued. "People who believe that humanity's future depends on cooperation rather than conquest. We've been preserving the real history, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth." Lisa felt a mixture of excitement and fear. "How many people are involved in this?" "More than you might think. Fewer than we need," Maria replied. "Scientists, historians, former military personnel who were there when the cover-ups began. We call ourselves the Archive Project." "The question is," Jake said, looking directly at Lisa, "are you ready to join us? Because once you're in, the UEF will consider you a threat to their version of history." Lisa thought about Director Price's reaction, about the fear she had seen in his eyes when he ordered her to stop the investigation. She thought about the mission logs that described successful diplomatic contact with alien beings and about the implications of that success being hidden from humanity. "I'm in," she said quietly, "but I want to know everything. I want to know who Jack Morrison really was and why the UEF is so afraid of his story." Maria smiled for the first time since they had met. "Then welcome to the Archive Project, Dr. Park. Your real education about human history is about to begin." As they left the bar together, Lisa realized that her life as a simple archaeologist was over. She was now part of something much larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. But she also knew that the truth about Jack Morrison and humanity's hidden history was worth whatever risks lay ahead. The journey to asteroid base Delta 7 took 3 days through unmarked space routes that did not appear on any official navigation charts. Lisa sat in the passenger compartment of the modified cargo hauler, watching the stars drift past through the small porthole. Maria Santos piloted the ship with the skill of someone who had spent decades navigating dangerous territories. The base was abandoned by the UEF in 2375, Maria explained as they approached their destination. Officially, it was decommissioned and scheduled for demolition. Unofficially, we've been using it as a secure storage facility for materials that certain people would prefer to see destroyed. The asteroid base appeared on their screens as a collection of interconnected modules, built into the surface of a large space rock. It looked dead and lifeless from the outside, but Lisa could see the subtle signs of recent activity, exhaust ports that had been recently used, communication arrays that were still functional, and airlocks that showed signs of regular maintenance. They docked at a small service bay on the base's lower level. As they disembarked, Lisa was surprised to find that the artificial gravity systems were still operational. The corridors were dimly lit but clean, and she could hear the hum of life support systems maintaining a breathable atmosphere. "How many people know about this place?" Lisa asked as they walked through the corridors toward the central complex. "About 30 people have access," Maria replied. All of them are people we trust completely. Most are veterans who served during the period when the cover-ups began. Some are researchers like yourself who stumbled onto inconvenient truths. They entered a large chamber that had been converted into a massive archive. The walls were lined with storage units containing data cores, physical documents, and artifacts from across human space. In the center of the room, several workstations were equipped with advanced computer systems and analysis equipment. A man in his 70s looked up from one of the workstations as they entered. He was tall and thin with white hair and the careful movements of someone who had spent decades working with delicate materials. "Dr. Park, I presume," he said with a warm smile. "I'm Alex Chun, former head of the UEF Historical Archives until I was forced to retire for asking too many questions." Lisa shook his hand, noting the firm grip and alert eyes that suggested his mind was still sharp despite his age. "Dr. Chun, Maria tells me you've been collecting evidence about Jack Morrison for years." Alex nodded and gestured toward a specific section of the archive. "Morrison's story is one of our most complete collections. We have original documents, testimony from survivors, and even some recording devices that were thought to be destroyed." They walked to a workstation where Alex activated a holographic display system. The air above the table shimmered, and suddenly Lisa was looking at a three-dimensional recreation of what appeared to be a UEF military briefing room from the 2340s. "This is a recording from March 15th, 2341, Alex explained. 6 months before the official records claimed that humanity made first contact with the Zephyrian Empire. The hologram showed a young man in UEF uniform standing before a group of senior officers. Lisa recognized him immediately from the photograph. She had found in the buried container it was Jack Morrison, looking exactly as he had in the faded image. "As you can see from my preliminary analysis," Morrison was saying in the recording, "the Zephyrian communication patterns follow a mathematical structure that can be decoded using modified translation algorithms. They're not trying to hide their intentions. They're actively seeking peaceful contact." One of the officers in the recording leaned forward. "Lieutenant Morrison, are you certain about these translation protocols? The implications of successful communication are enormous," Morrison nodded confidently. "Sir, I've spent 3 weeks studying their transmissions. They're using a combination of mathematical concepts and emotional resonance patterns that suggest a highly developed culture. More importantly, they're showing us respect by attempting to communicate in ways they think we might understand." Lisa watched in fascination as Morrison explained complex linguistic theories with the ease of someone who had spent years studying alien communication methods. This was decades before the UEF had developed their current first contact protocols, yet Morrison was describing techniques that were far more advanced than anything currently in use. "How is this possible?" Lisa asked Alex. "The official records say that Morrison was just a regular soldier. This recording shows him as a linguistic genius." Alex smiled grimly. "That's because Jack Morrison was far more than a regular soldier. He was a prodigy who mastered 6 human languages before he was 20 and showed an intuitive understanding of communication theory that his instructors had never seen before." The recording continued, showing Morrison presenting detailed cultural analysis of Zephyrian society based on their communication patterns. He described a species that valued cooperation over competition, knowledge over power, and peaceful exploration over territorial expansion. "The Zephyrians represent an opportunity for humanity to learn from a species that has solved many of the problems we still struggle with," Morrison said in the recording. "They've maintained interstellar civilization for over 2,000 years, without major wars. Their technology is advanced, but they've chosen to use it for exploration and cultural development rather than military conquest." Another officer interrupted. "Lieutenant, what you're describing sounds almost too good to be true. Are you certain they're not simply more sophisticated in their deception?" Morrison's expression grew serious. "Sir, I've analyzed every transmission they've sent. There's no deception here. They're genuinely interested in peaceful contact and cultural exchange. They've even offered to share certain technologies that could benefit both species. Lisa felt a chill as she realized the implications. They offered to share technology. What happened to those offers? Alex manipulated the holographic controls, fast-forwarding through the recording. Morrison successfully established formal diplomatic contact with the Zephyrians in April of 2341, the first cultural exchange. Mission was scheduled for June, but something went wrong. The recording now showed a different scene, Morrison in what appeared to be a prison cell, his uniform torn and his face showing signs of recent injury. He was speaking directly to the camera, his voice urgent and desperate. If anyone ever finds this recording, you need to know that the Zephyrians were peaceful. They came to the meeting as arranged, with gifts and offers of friendship. But Admiral Cross had already made the decision to treat them as a threat. When they arrived, our ships opened fire without warning, Lisa gasped. They attacked during a diplomatic meeting? The massacre lasted less than an hour, Alex said quietly. 17 Zephyrian ships were destroyed. Thousands of their people died. Morrison tried to stop it, but he was arrested for insubordination. The recording continued with Morrison's desperate explanation. They had children with them, families who had come to meet humanity for the first time. They had no weapons, no shields, no way to defend themselves. We committed genocide, and they called it a victory. What happened to Morrison after this? Lisa asked. Dallas activated another recording, this one showing Morrison in a different location, what appeared to be a secret facility. He looked older, more tired, but his eyes still held their determined fire. This recording is from 6 months later. Morrison had been transferred to a classified research facility where they were trying to use his linguistic abilities to decode captured Zephyrian technology, but he had other plans. In this recording, Morrison was speaking to someone off camera. I've made contact with surviving Zephyrians. They're willing to overlook what happened, but only if humanity proves it can change. I'm going to help them, even if it means giving up everything I've ever known. The recording ended abruptly. Alex turned to Lisa with a grave expression. That was the last official record of Jack Morrison. According to UEF files, he died in a transport accident 3 days later. But we have reason to believe he actually escaped and joined the Zephyrians. Lisa stared at the empty holographic display, her mind racing with the implications of what she had seen. So the UEF's first contact with alien life was actually a massacre that they covered up by erasing the records and killing the witnesses. Not killing, Maria corrected. Most of the witnesses were reassigned to classified projects or given memory modification treatments. The UEF found it easier to make people forget than to eliminate them entirely. Memory modification? A process that selectively removes or alters specific memories, Alex explained. It was experimental in the 2340s, but effective enough to ensure that anyone who might contradict the official story would have no clear recollection of what actually happened. Lisa felt a growing sense of horror as she understood the scope of the cover-up. How many people knew the truth? Morrison's entire unit, about 40 people. The diplomatic staff, another dozen. Various support personnel, maybe 20 more. All of them were either transferred to black sites or subjected to memory modification, and the Zephyrians. Lisa spent 3 days at the asteroid base reviewing files and recordings that painted a picture of systematic deception that went far beyond Jack Morrison's story. Alex Chin showed her documents that revealed how the UEF had deliberately altered historical records, reclassified peaceful alien species as hostile threats, and created false intelligence reports to justify military expansion. The Morrison incident was just the beginning, Alex explained as they sat in the archive's main chamber. Once the UEF leadership realized how much money and power they could gain from constant military preparation, they made sure that every subsequent alien contact would be treated as a potential threat. Lisa studied a document dated 3 months after Morrison's disappearance. It was a memorandum from General Frank Miller, head of UEF Strategic Command, outlining what he called the Expansion Security Protocol. All alien contacts will be evaluated as potential security risks, she read aloud. Peaceful overtures will be treated as potential deception tactics. Military response will be the primary option for any unidentified alien presence. Alex nodded. Grimly, Miller was the architect of the entire cover-up. He convinced the UF Council that Morrison's diplomatic success was actually a sign of alien manipulation. According to his reports, the Zephyrians were using Morrison to gather intelligence about human military capabilities. But that's completely false, Lisa protested. The recordings showed that Morrison initiated contact on his own. Truth was less important than political necessity, Maria Santos said as she joined them at the workstation. Miller's policies created a massive military budget that made certain corporations extremely wealthy. Peace was bad for business. Lisa continued reading through the files, discovering the scope of the conspiracy. Senator Linda Gray had introduced legislation that increased military funding by 300% in the years following the Zephyrian massacre. Defense contractors had received billions of credits in contracts for new weapon systems designed to fight alien threats that, according to the evidence in the archive, largely did not exist. Look at this, Lisa said, pointing to a financial document. Miller's brother owned controlling interest in Titan Defense Systems. They received the largest single contract in UEF history just 6 months after Morrison disappeared. Alex pulled up another file on the holographic display. And here's the really disturbing part. Commander Paul Young was Morrison's second-in-command. He was the only other person who survived the diplomatic meeting with the Zephyrians. The file contained medical records showing that Young had been subjected to experimental memory modification procedures. Before the treatment, his testimony supported Morrison's account of the peaceful nature of Zephyrian contact. After the treatment, his statements matched the official UEF version of events. They literally rewrote his memories, Lisa said, feeling sick to her stomach. How many other people were subjected to this? We've documented at least 30 cases, Maria replied. Scientists, diplomatic staff, even some journalists who were asking too many questions. Anyone who might contradict the official narrative was either transferred to classified assignments or had their memories altered. Lisa found herself drawn to another set of files that documented Morrison's background before his military service. What she discovered was even more remarkable than his linguistic abilities. Morrison had grown up on a remote colony world where he had regular contact with non-human species, specifically, a group of peaceful traders who visited the colony regularly. He learned his first alien language when he was 12 years old. She read from his educational records. By the time he joined the UEF, he was already fluent in 3 non-human languages. Alex smiled sadly. Morrison understood something that the UEF leadership never wanted to accept, that peaceful coexistence with alien species was not only possible, but natural. He had been living proof of that fact since childhood. The files revealed that Morrison had written extensively about his experiences with alien cultures. His personal journals, recovered from the research facility where he had been held, showed a man who genuinely believed that humanity's future depended on learning to cooperate with other species rather than dominating them. Listen to this, Lisa said, reading from one of Morrison's journal entries. Humanity's greatest strength is not our capacity for violence, but our ability to adapt and learn. The Zephyrians have shown us that intelligence and compassion can create a civilization that lasts for thousands of years. We could learn from them if we choose to listen instead of fight. But the files also revealed the growing pressure that Morrison faced as his diplomatic success became a political problem. Internal UEF communications showed that General Miller and his supporters viewed Morrison's achievements as a threat to their plans for military expansion. Here's a communication from Miller to Admiral Cross, Alex said, activating another document. Morrison's continued success in alien relations undermines our strategic objectives. Recommend immediate reassignment to eliminate his influence on policy decisions. Lisa realized that Morrison had been fighting a battle on 2 fronts, trying to establish peaceful relations with alien species while also defending himself against his own superiors who saw his success as a threat to their power. The most disturbing revelation came in a file, marked Project Clean Slate. It outlined a systematic plan to erase all evidence of successful peaceful contact with alien species. The project included memory modification, document destruction, witness relocation, and what the files euphemistically called permanent reassignment. Permanent reassignment, Lisa said quietly. What does that mean? Maria's expression grew dark. In some cases, it meant exactly what you think it means. People who couldn't be silenced through other methods simply disappeared. Lisa found a list of names associated with Project Clean Slate, dozens of scientists, military personnel, and civilian witnesses who had been present during various alien contact incidents. Next to many of the names were status updates, memory, modification successful, relocated to classified assignment, or simply terminated. Dr. Amy Ross, Lisa read from the list. She was the scientist who documented Morrison's linguistic abilities. Status, terminated, Alex nodded sadly. She refused to cooperate with the cover-up. Her research proved that Morrison's methods could be taught to other humans, potentially revolutionizing how we communicate with alien species. That made her too dangerous to leave alive. The weight of what she was learning began to overwhelm Lisa. This wasn't just about hiding one man's story. It was about a systematic campaign to prevent humanity from developing peaceful relationships with other intelligent species. How long has this been going on? She asked. 46 years, Maria replied. Every alien contact since Morrison has been handled according to Miller's protocols. Species that might have been valuable allies have been treated as enemies. Others have simply been driven away by our aggressive posture. Lisa discovered that Morrison had left behind detailed protocols for peaceful first contact procedures. His research included methods for rapid language acquisition, cultural analysis techniques, and diplomatic strategies that took into account the psychological differences between species. These protocols are decades ahead of anything the UEF currently uses, she said, studying Morrison's work. If they had implemented his methods, we could have had dozens of alien allies by now. Instead, we have a military machine that consumes enormous resources preparing for wars that never needed to happen. Alex said bitterly. As Lisa continued reviewing the files, she found evidence that Morrison had not simply disappeared after his escape from the research facility. There were unconfirmed reports of human activity in Zephyrian space, linguistic analysis of alien communications that showed human influence, and even some blurry photographs that might have shown an older Morrison working alongside Zephyrian researchers. You think he's still alive? Lisa asked. Maria and Alex exchanged a meaningful look. We've been collecting evidence for years that suggests Morrison not only survived, but has been working with the Zephyrians to develop new approaches to interspecies cooperation, Maria said carefully. If that's true, then he's been preparing? For something, Alex added. The question is what, and whether humanity will be ready when the time comes. Lisa closed the file she had been reading and looked around the archive with new understanding. Morrison's story wasn't just history. It was a warning about the choices that humanity continued to make. Every day that the UEF maintained its aggressive expansion policies, they were moving further away from the future that Morrison had envisioned. What happens now? She asked. Now you have to decide what you're willing to risk to bring this truth to light, Maria replied. Because once we leave this asteroid, the UEF will be watching. They've spent decades protecting these secrets, and they won't hesitate to protect them from us. The alarm systems on asteroid base Delta 7 began blaring just as Lisa finished copying the Morrison files to her personal storage device. Red warning lights flashed throughout the archive chamber, and Maria Santos rushed to the main communication console with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been preparing for this moment for years. UEF patrol ships, Maria announced grimly as she studied the sensor readings. 3 vessels, military configuration, approaching fast from the inner system. They'll be here in less than an hour. Alex Chun moved quickly to a secure terminal. and began initiating what appeared to be an emergency protocol. "How did they find us?" he asked as his fingers flew across the controls. "Someone must have tracked Dr. Park's movements," Maria replied. "The UEF has been monitoring communications from New Geneva Research Station since she made her discovery." Lisa felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "This is my fault. I led them right to you." "No," Jake Turner said as he emerged from another section of the archive, carrying a heavy equipment bag. "This was always a possibility. We've been preparing for this day since we started the archive project." Lisa watched in amazement as the team moved with military precision to secure their most important materials. Alex activated what appeared to be a data destruction sequence for the less critical files, while Jake and Maria began loading portable storage devices with the most vital information. "What about all the evidence?" Lisa asked, gesturing toward the massive archive around them. "We have copies stored in 12 other locations," Alex explained as he worked. "The physical artifacts are important, but the information is what really matters. As long as the truth survives, we can rebuild." Maria handed Lisa a small device that looked like a standard data pad. "This contains everything we've shown you about Morrison, plus additional files that might become important later. Guard it with your life." The evacuation proceeded with practiced efficiency, but Lisa could see the pain in Alex's eyes as he prepared to abandon decades of careful research. This archive represented the hidden history of humanity's expansion into space, and now it would be destroyed to prevent it from falling into UEF hands. "Where will we go?" Lisa asked as they prepared to board their ship. "We have safe houses throughout the outer colonies," Jake replied. "But first, we need to get you somewhere the UEF can't easily reach." As their ship departed from the asteroid base, Lisa watched through the viewport as Alex activated the base's self-destruct sequence. The explosion lit up space like a small star, erasing 40 years of carefully preserved evidence in a matter of seconds. "The Corvani situation has accelerated our timeline," Maria explained as they entered hyperspace. "We've been monitoring UEF communications, and they're preparing for first contact with a new species near the Centauri border." Lisa remembered reading about the Corvani in recent intelligence reports. They were described as a potentially hostile species that had been detected in a previously unexplored system. "The UEF is treating them as a threat?" "Exactly the same pattern as with the Zephyrians," Jake said bitterly. "Long-range scans show advanced technology, so the military assumes they must be dangerous. Admiral P. Clark has been given authorization to use appropriate force if the Corvani show any signs of aggression. But that's not the worst part," Maria continued. "We've intercepted communications suggesting that the Corvani have been trying to establish peaceful contact for months. They've been sending mathematical sequences and cultural information, just like the Zephyrians did 46 years ago." Lisa felt a chill of recognition. Morrison's protocols would work with them, which is exactly why the UEF can't be allowed to handle this contact, Alex said from the pilot's seat. "If we don't intervene, history will repeat itself. Another peaceful species will be massacred, and the UEF will use it to justify even more military expansion." Their destination was a mining station in the Tau Ceti system, far enough from UEF space to provide temporary safety. But as they traveled, Lisa learned that their problems were bigger than just avoiding capture. "Agent Carol Stone is leading the investigation into your activities," Maria explained, showing Lisa a UEF security briefing they had intercepted. "She's one of their best hunters, specializing in tracking down people who ask inconvenient questions." The briefing contained Lisa's photograph, along with detailed information about her background, associates, and research activities. Stone had been tracking her movements since the moment she first tried to access Morrison's military records. "They've been watching you longer than you realize," Jake said. "Your discovery of Morrison's equipment wasn't an accident. The UEF has been monitoring archaeological sites for decades, looking for evidence of suppressed history." Lisa stared at the intelligence report in shock. "You're saying they wanted me to find those files?" "Not exactly," Maria replied. But they've been prepared for someone to eventually uncover evidence of the cover-up. Stone's job is to contain the damage when it happens. The mining station where they sought refuge was operated by sympathizers who had been helping the archive project for years. Captain Ryan Bell, the station commander, was a former UF officer who had resigned his commission after witnessing what he called unnecessary aggression during a first contact incident. The Corvani ships had been maintaining position at the edge of their system for 3 weeks, Ryan explained as they gathered in his office. They're clearly waiting for some kind of response to their communication attempts. What kind of communications? Lisa asked. Ryan activated a holographic display showing the intercepted Corvani transmissions, mathematical sequences, star charts, and what appears to be cultural information. It's exactly the same approach the Zephyrians used, according to the records you've shown me. Lisa studied the transmissions and recognized the patterns that Morrison had described in his research. The Corvani were following diplomatic protocols that suggested a sophisticated understanding of interspecies communication. How long before the UEF fleet arrives? Maria asked. Admiral Clark's task force is already in position, Ryan replied grimly. 12 ships, including the heavy cruiser Valiant. They're waiting for orders from UEF command. Jake pulled up additional intelligence on his portable terminal. We've identified someone who might be able to help. Lieutenant Emma Fox is communications officer on the Valiant. Her psychological profile suggests she might be sympathetic to our cause. That's not enough, Alex said. We need someone with real authority, someone who can override Clark's orders if necessary. Lisa had been studying the Corvani communications while the others talked. Something about the mathematical sequences seemed familiar, and she realized where she had seen similar patterns before. These sequences, she said, pointing to the holographic display, they're not just mathematical expressions. They're linguistic, teaching tools designed to help another species learn their communication methods. Maria looked at the display more carefully. You're certain? Morrison wrote about this exact technique in his protocols, Lisa replied. The Corvani are trying to teach us their language just like the Zephyrians did. But the UEF doesn't recognize it because they've never implemented Morrison's translation methods. The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. The Corvani were offering humanity the same opportunity for peaceful contact that the Zephyrians had offered 46 years ago. And just like before, the UEF was preparing to respond with violence. We have to warn them, Lisa said urgently. The Corvani don't understand that humanity will see their peaceful overtures as a threat. Warning them isn't enough, Jake replied. We need to prevent the massacre entirely. And there's only one person who might be able to do that. Maria nodded slowly. Morrison, if he's really still alive and if he's been working with the Zephyrians, all these years he might have developed new diplomatic protocols that could work with the Corvani. But how do we contact him? Lisa asked. We don't even know where he is. Alex smiled grimly. Actually, we have some ideas about that. The question is whether we can reach him before Admiral Clark decides that the Corvani are too dangerous to leave alive. As Lisa looked around the room at the faces of people who had dedicated their lives to preserving humanity's hidden history, she realized that the next few days would determine whether Morrison's vision of peaceful coexistence would finally be realized, or whether another species would be destroyed to protect the UEF's narrative of perpetual conflict. The hunt for Jack Morrison was about to begin, and humanity's future hung in the balance. The emergency transmission arrived at the mining station, just 12 hours after the archive project team had settled into their temporary refuge. It was encoded in a format that Alex Chun recognized immediately, the same mathematical sequences that Morrison had used in his original communications with the Zephyrians 46 years ago. Someone is using Morrison's protocols, Alex said excitedly as he worked to decode the message. The signal is coming from the edge of Corvani space, but it's definitely human in origin. Lisa watched the translation appear on the screen, her heart racing as she read the words that would change everything. To those who preserve the true history of first contact. The Corvani delegation arrives at the neutral zone in 18 hours. Admiral Clark's fleet has orders to fire if they enter UEF space. Peaceful contact is still possible, but only if humanity remembers how to listen instead of fight. The old protocols still work. Time to finish what we started. The message was signed with a simple initial Maria Santos studied the transmission data. The signal originated from a ship using Zephyrian technology, but modified with human components. It has to be him. Jake Turner was already working on their ship's navigation system. If Morrison is really out there, and if he's planning to intervene in the Corvani contact, we need to get to the neutral zone before Admiral Clark decides to start shooting. The journey to the edge of UEF space took 8 hours at maximum speed. As they traveled, Lisa reviewed Morrison's original protocols, trying to understand how they might apply to the current situation with the Corvani. His methods emphasized patience, respect, and the assumption that alien species were acting from rational motivations rather than malicious intent. Morrison understood something that the UEF leadership never accepted, she said as she studied his work. That fear of the unknown makes us see threats where none exist. His protocols are designed to overcome that fear by building understanding. When they arrived at the neutral zone, they found a scene that was both familiar and terrifying. Admiral Clark's fleet hung in space like a wall of metal and weapons. 12 ships arranged in attack formation facing the edge of Corvani space. The parallels to the Zephyrian massacre were impossible to ignore. There, Alex said, pointing to the long-range sensors. Single ship, unknown configuration, maintaining position between the two fleets. The ship appeared on their screens as a unique hybrid of human and alien technology. It was clearly built for peaceful purposes rather than warfare, with what appeared to be advanced communication arrays instead of weapon systems. Admiral Clark is demanding that the unknown vessel identify itself, Jake reported, monitoring UEF military communications. He's giving them 10 minutes to respond before he considers them a threat. Lisa felt a moment of panic. If Morrison was on that ship, he was placing himself directly between two potentially hostile fleets. Any aggressive move by either side could result in his destruction. Then, a new transmission appeared on their communications system. This time, it was a direct video signal, and Lisa found herself looking at a face she had only seen in old recordings and faded photographs. Jack Morrison looked older, his dark hair now white and his face lined with decades of experience. But his eyes still held the same determined intelligence that had made him humanity's greatest diplomat. Behind him, Lisa could see the interior of his ship, which appeared to be staffed by a mixed crew of humans and aliens. "Dr. Park," Morrison said, looking directly at her through the screen. "I've been following your work. Thank you for preserving the truth about what happened 46 years ago." Lisa was momentarily speechless. The man who had become a legend was speaking to her as if they were old colleagues. "Mr. Morrison, the UEF fleet is prepared to fire on the Corvani delegation." "We have to stop them," Morrison nodded gravely. "I know, I've spent decades preparing for this moment. The Corvani are peaceful, just like the Zephyrians were. But this time, we're going to do things differently." On the main screen, they watched. As Morrison's ship began transmitting on all frequencies, broadcasting to both the UEF fleet and the approaching Corvani vessels. The transmission included mathematical sequences, star charts, and what appeared to be detailed cultural information about humanity. "He's introducing us to the Corvani," Alex said in amazement, using their own protocols to explain human culture and intentions. Admiral Clark's response was immediate and predictable. "Unknown vessel, you are interfering with UEF military operations. Identify yourself immediately or be considered hostile." Morrison's reply was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that both fleets and the news networks throughout human space could hear every word. "Admiral Clark, this is Jack Morrison, former UEF Special Operations, serial number 7742 Delta. I am here to prevent the same mistake that was made with the Zephyrians 46 years ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in both fleets had just heard a name that officially did not exist, spoken by a man who was supposed to be dead. "Morrison is transmitting his complete service record. Jake reported. Everything the UEF tried to erase. The successful first contact with the Zephyrians, the massacre, the cover-up, it's all being broadcast across human space, Lisa watched. As Morrison continued his transmission, this time addressing the Corvani directly in their own language. His pronunciation was flawless, and even through the translation system, she could hear the respect and friendship in his voice. Honored delegates of the Corvani people, Morrison said, humanity offers greetings and apologies for the delay in responding to your peaceful overtures. We are still learning how to be worthy neighbors in this galaxy. The Corvani response came immediately, and Lisa was amazed to hear Morrison translating in real time as a musical, complex language filled the communication channels. The Corvani delegation welcomes the opportunity for peaceful contact. They say they have been waiting patiently for humanity to remember how to listen. Admiral Clark's voice cut through the transmissions, filled with anger and confusion. This is impossible. Morrison died decades ago. This is some kind of alien deception? Morrison's response was calm but firm. Admiral, I'm transmitting my complete biometric data and personal history. Your own computers will confirm my identity. More importantly, I'm offering you the choice that Admiral Cross was never given, the chance to make history instead of repeating it. Lisa watched in fascination as Morrison orchestrated the most complex diplomatic ballet she had ever witnessed. He simultaneously managed communications with the Corvani delegation, provided Admiral Clark with evidence of his identity and broadcast the true history of human-alien contact to the entire UEF. The Corvani are offering to share information about 3 other peaceful species in nearby systems, Morrison translated as the alien delegation continued their transmissions. They've been waiting for humanity to demonstrate that we can be trusted before making these introductions. The implications were staggering. Instead of one potential alien contact, Morrison was offering humanity the possibility of peaceful relationships with multiple species. Admiral Clark's fleet remained in attack formation, but Lisa could see that. Some of the ships were powering down their weapon systems. Lieutenant Fox on the Valiant is broadcasting Morrison's historical records to the other ships, Jake reported. The fleet commanders are learning the truth about the Zephyrian massacre. Morrison continued his diplomatic work, establishing formal communication protocols between the UEF and Corvani fleets. Lisa realized she was witnessing the first successful peaceful first contact in human history, conducted by a man who had spent 46 years preparing for this moment. Admiral Clark, Morrison said finally, I'm offering you the chance to be remembered as the man who chose peace over war. The Corvani delegation is prepared to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. All you have to do is lower your weapons and extend your hand in friendship. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Then, slowly, the weapon systems on Admiral Clark's flagship went offline. One by one, the other ships in the fleet followed suit. This is Admiral Clark to Corvani delegation, came the voice over the communication system. The United Earth Federation welcomes you to human space and requests permission to begin formal diplomatic discussions. Lisa felt tears running down her cheeks as she watched history being made. Morrison had not only prevented another massacre, but had opened the door to a future of peaceful cooperation between species. 46 years ago, we made a terrible mistake, Morrison said in his final transmission. Today we begin to make it right. The age of fear is ending. The age of understanding has begun. As the first human-Corvani diplomatic meeting began, Lisa realized that Jack Morrison's greatest achievement was not just preventing a war, but proving that humanity was capable of learning from its mistakes. The secret history that the UEF had tried to erase had finally become the foundation for a better future.